So this is track 3 of the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health's plenary meeting. And if we could move to and my name is Susan Fairley. And if we could move to the next slide, please, thank you. So I'd like to start by pointing out that translations are available for this session. The link listed on this slide is where you can find those. And we have translations available in Japanese, Spanish, German, and French. And there's also an English language captioning service available. Moving to the next slide, please. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this session and indeed to the meeting overall. It is our absolute pleasure to have you join us for this. And then moving to the next slide, please. We are delighted to see that we have continued to see growth in terms of the number of countries represented at this meeting. Having participation from so many places really makes all the difference to GA4GH. And it is wonderful to see the levels of engagement continuing to grow year on year. Some of this, no doubt, due to the switch to a virtual meeting in the last couple of years, but we're really, really pleased to have so many people from so many different parts of the world joining this meeting. And if you could move to the next slide, please. We also want to recognise that obviously now and in recent times, it is not business as usual. And we would like to thank everybody who's both finding time to attend this meeting and also who contributes to our work, who participates in standards development and implementation, for finding time to do this while you've been taking on new responsibilities related to COVID, taking on additional work, those of you in clinical settings, and adjusting to just a different way of working for everybody. We really appreciate the levels of support that people in GA4GH have shown to each other. And your ongoing contributions to this work in very difficult circumstances. And moving to the next slide, please. So if you want to get in touch for any technical support during this meeting, there are a number of options open to you. We have a technical support from the platform providers for this meeting, CVent, and you can contact at cvent-support@ga4gh.org. If you have questions about GA4GH, we have another couple of channels that you can use. We have Slack set up. You can ask questions on the general channel there. And in addition to that, you can also contact the GA4GH operations team at operations@ga4gh.org. And moving to the next slide, please. So if you want to reach out and talk to other attendees at this meeting, again, the Slack instance that I mentioned is a great way to get in touch with people. The general channel, you're completely welcome to post there, whether it's comments or questions about the talk. It's also a really great place to join if you want to be able to continue conversations after the meeting. So great to post there during the sessions, but also possible to go ahead and continue those conversations down the line or pick things up, in a week or two. So really encourage you to take a look at that. And also there's a bunch of other channels on there dedicated to specific standards. So if you have a specific topic of interest, you may find something on Slack that is going to catch your eye. And moving to the next slide, please. For the course of the meeting, most things are gathered in the attendee hub. The URL here is where you can find that. So if you log into that, you should have received an email at registration. You can log in there and that will list the full schedule and links to the poster sessions and so on. And the next slide, please. In terms of reaching out to the wider community at the meeting, again, we have the Slack instance that I've mentioned. If you want to use Twitter, you're very welcome to tweet. We have the tags associated with the meeting listed here on the slide, 9th Plenary and GA4GH Community. And in addition to that, we're also using Spatial. So there's a lounge space where you can go into Spatial and talk to other people there. And moving to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we're doing at this meeting is using Slido for questions. And we're going to give you a chance to test this out just now. So if you want to open up a new window or tab in your browser, and you can enter in Slido, sli.do. Once you've got that up, it should give you a prompt where you can enter a code, and that would be GA4GH for our meeting. And then once you've done that, you can then post questions. And you can also upvote questions from other people if somebody else has already asked the question that you're interested in. So we're going to test that out just now, and you're going to get to ask some test questions of me. So I think if we move to the next slide, we will hopefully start to see any questions that anybody wants to ask. So where in Scotland am I from? excellent work placing the accent. I'm from Aberdeen. I don't know if we have any other questions. I'm going to give it a second and then we're going to move on. Okay, I'm going to take that as a successful test, but we will move on to the next slide, please. Oh, and GA4GH so far is very good. Thank you very much indeed. I've been as acting as the Chief Standards Officer for 6 months, and it's been an absolute pleasure. that one I don't know the answer to. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we had a great first day for this meeting yesterday. We've already had 2 tracks that have presented. If you didn't manage to catch those live, this is not a problem. There are now links up to recordings of these on the Attendee Hub. So if you go to the Schedule tab, there's then an on-demand option, which will link through to these 2 recordings. Track 1 included our wonderful keynote presentation from Harold Varmus, talking about genomics and the World Health Organization's perspective on that. We also had updates on some current initiatives in GA4GH, some work from our EDI advisory group, presentations on a bunch of different work going on in the different standards, and also presentations on the Federated Analysis Systems project, which seeks to pull together different standards, and also our starter kit implementation to help people getting up and running. We then also had a brilliant track 2 that included a presentation on the Genomics Health Implementation Forum from Catherine, and then moved on to a set of really amazing talks about real-world implementations, where people were talking about how they were deploying and using and putting into use GA4GH standards in their own environments. And that included talks from Australian Genomics and groups in Singapore and Japan, and some really incredible work going on there. We were then also incredibly fortunate to have a really great session on engaging with underrepresented communities. So this included presentations from COVARNet, from the Human Pangenome Reference Consortium, the Australian Centre for Indigenous Genomics, and all of us, and also a really, really interesting panel discussion at the end of that. So if you weren't able to catch those, I'd really strongly recommend trying to check out those recordings. They're really, really interesting, really good. So moving to the next slide, please. So today we're moving on to talk about responsible data. Responsible data sharing is really at the heart of GA4GH. It goes to our 2 foundational work streams, looking at ethics and security. And if you could move to the next slide, please. So our schedule for this session for track 3 is going to kick off with a panel talking about responsible data. We have presentations looking at privacy preserving federated analytics, looking at responsible data sharing, ethical, legal and governance considerations around this, and responsible return of results. And that's going to finish up with a panel discussion. We then have a short break, and then we're going to pick up again on a similar theme to part of yesterday's session, looking at real world implementations. And today we're going to be hearing presentations from the Beyond 1 Million Genomes project, from NIH's cloud interoperability work, H3 Africa, and also looking at Beacon as a presentation from the Centre for Genomic Regulation in Barcelona. So moving on to the next slide, please. So we have some expectations for conduct during this meeting. We expect all participants to be respectful, and also we ask people to please be transparent about any potential conflicts of interest that you may have. The following behaviours that are listed here will not be tolerated, so discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, disrespectful behaviours or violence are not acceptable. And moving to the next slide, please. And finally, I would like to just thank the organising committee who have put this together. Their names are listed here. They have done an incredible job of work. Anyone who has ever participated in organising one of these meetings will know full well the amount of effort that goes into this. So we have had a wonderful meeting so far. I'm sure that day 2 is going to be every bit as good. And we owe everybody listed on this slide a huge thank you for their efforts to put together such a wonderful meeting. So with that, if we could move to the next slide, please. And I'm going to hand over now to Alice, who is, I think, going to be chairing the first session and our first presentation in this session. And I hope you're going to thoroughly enjoy this track. Thank you.